This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
Iraq's total oil exports stand at 3.6 million barrels per day, Oil Minister Hayyan Abdul Ghani said on Monday, adding that a fire at Iraq's Zubair oilfield on Sunday did not impact shipments. Exports were proceeding normally and remained uninterrupted, Abdul Ghani said, with exports from Iraq's northern Kurdistan region at 195,000 barrels of oil per day and sometimes as high as 200,000 barrels of oil per day after northern shipments resumed following a deal in late September. Iraq reported total oil exports of about 3.4 million barrels of oil per day last month. The blaze, which broke out while workers were conducting welding operations near a pipeline in the field, left at least 2 workers dead and seriously wounded 5. Officials said on Sunday.
Oil prices recovered from early losses on Monday as optimism over a trade deal framework between the US and China countered concerns about weak demand for crude. Brent crude futures were down 14 cents, or nearly 0.2%, to $65.70 a barrel at 12:27 GMT. US West Texas Intermediate crude futures were down 9 cents or 0.2%, to $61.41. Both contracts fell around 1% in early trade. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said on Sunday U.S. and Chinese officials had hashed out a substantial framework for a trade deal that could avoid 100% U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods and achieve a deferral of China's rare earth export controls in trade discussions this week.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
U.S. natural gas futures eased about 1% to a one-week low on Monday on a small output increase in recent days and ample amounts of fuel in storage. That small price decline came despite forecasts for colder weather and more demand over the next 2 weeks than previously expected, and near-record flows of gas to liquefied natural gas export plants. Front-month gas futures for November delivery on the New York Mercantile Exchange fell 2.8 cents, or 0.9%, to $3.276 per million British thermal units, putting the contract on track for its lowest close since October 17 for a third day in a row.
Argentina's government has raised the price of biodiesel for its mandatory blending with diesel in the domestic market, a decree published in the official Gazette showed on Monday. The Energy Secretariat set the minimum purchase price for biodiesel at 1,590,832 pesos. $1,066.20 per metric ton, up from a previous price of 1,508,704 pesos. Argentina is a major producer of biofuels, particularly biodiesel, and regularly raises prices for the domestic market. The new prices take effect from the date of their publication in the official Gazette, the government said. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. Gold prices fell 2% on Monday, as hopes of easing U.S.-China trade tensions lifted risk appetite for equities, while investors awaited major central bank meetings this week for rate cut cues. Spot gold was down 2% at $4,029.69 per ounce as of 11:22 GMT. Prices hit a record high of $4,381.21 on October 20, buoyed by rising bets for U.S. rate cuts and geopolitical and economic uncertainties, but have since fallen more than 5%. U.S. gold futures for December delivery lost 2.3% to $4,042.80. Asian stocks surged as signs of a détente in China-U.S. Trade tensions buoyed risk appetite in a strong start to a week that will be headlined by central bank meetings and megacap earnings.
Copper prices hit 17-month highs on Monday as signs of easing trade tensions between the world's 2 largest economies, China and the US, and hopes for stronger growth and demand spurred buying. Benchmark copper on the London Metal Exchange traded 0.4% higher at $11,011 a metric ton in official rings after earlier touching $11,094 a ton, the highest since May 20 last year. Chinese and U.S. officials have thrashed out the framework of a trade deal for President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping to decide on later this week, which would pause more onerous U.S. tariffs and Chinese rare earths export controls.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
Chicago soybeans rose on Monday on hopes the United States could restart its soybean exports to China after U.S. President Donald Trump said he hoped to reach a trade deal with China during his visit to Asia this week. Chicago Board of Trade's most active soybeans SV1 rose 1.9% to $10.61 minus 1/2 per bushel at 1009 GMT, their highest in around 4 months. Corn and wheat received spillover support from soybeans. Corn rose 1.4% to $4.29 minus 1/2 a bushel, wheat rose 2.1% to $5.23 minus 1/4 a bushel.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.